One of the motivating factors for this research that led to the book Firms of Endearment really was built on my previous work with Jack Sheth of Emory University on marketing productivity. And we had documented in a number of papers over about 10 years that marketing productivity as defined by the output versus input, what we get in terms of customer satisfaction, loyalty, and trust as businesses relative to what we're spending on marketing, which is advertising and sales promotion and personal selling and all the other components within that. And we had found that, first of all, marketing consumes a greater proportion of corporate spending than ever before. It's been steadily rising for 50, 60 years. So on average, it's about 50% of all spending is somehow related to marketing at corporations. And in fact, if you look at it on a per family basis, we spend about $1 trillion on marketing in this country every year. And that comes to about $13,000 per family of four, which amounts to more than 90% of the per capita income of the world's population. So we're spending that on ads and on coupons, right, and on selling and so forth. And our question was, what value are we getting at the company level, at the customer level, and at a societal level from all of that spending? Is this money well spent? And the conclusions that we had drawn over the years was that in fact it's not. Customer satisfaction levels were steadily declining and then sort of plateaued at a relatively low level, according to the American Customer Satisfaction Index at the University of Michigan. Customer loyalty numbers in general have been going down in most industries. Very few people are actually insistently loyal to a particular company or supplier. They tend to switch around between whoever is offering the best deal at the moment. So the people have become more and more transaction-oriented, even as companies have started to talk more about relationship management. And certainly the commodity in least or in shortest supply is trust. So people, even if they are loyal, because they don't have a choice or because there's no better alternative, they really don't have a high degree of trust for most of the companies that they do business with. So if you think about that, it's a very strong indictment of marketing that if we spend all this money and yet the primary indicators of success are all in fact trending downwards, that says that we are doing a pretty poor job. So we found instances where there seems to be a negative correlation. In fact, companies, the more money they spend on marketing, the less trust they have and the less loyalty they tend to generate. What they do is they buy loyalty. I can get you to buy my product every time if I keep giving you bigger and bigger incentives. And it's like a drug, right? I have to keep giving you more and more to get the same impact. And we said that's not a sustainable way. And that's really not what marketing is all about. It's not about all these tactics and tools and tricks. Marketing is fundamentally about aligning what you do with the real needs, not just the desires, the real needs of customers. So we set out on a project to look for companies that, in fact, spent relatively little on marketing and yet had outstanding satisfaction, loyalty, and trust with their customers. So we called it In Search of Marketing Excellence. That was the original title of this. And we started finding several such companies. So Whole Foods is one example, which spends about 1/10 of the industry norm on marketing. There's a regional company in the New England area called Jordan's Furniture, which is now acquired by Warren Buffett, actually, which is one of the country's leading furniture retailers. They spend about 1/4 of the industry norm on marketing, and yet their sales per square foot are 6 times higher. They sell $960 per square foot. The industry norm is about $160. Right? So they spend very little and they get much better results. And many other companies, Google and Starbucks, hardly spend any money on advertising at all, and yet they have outstanding indicators in terms of marketing and customer performance. So as we started looking at these companies and say, why are they able to do this? What we found is that these companies are really the beneficiaries of a lot of free marketing. The best kind of marketing is free marketing, which comes from word of mouth, not only with your satisfied customers, but also with your employees and the communities in which you operate. So communities are actually acting on your behalf, and supporting you in many ways, suppliers, everybody. So you exist within this system where everybody, in fact, does things that ultimately benefit you from a marketing perspective. And that became a big element in terms of why these companies are able to do the seemingly irreconcilable, which is you're spending more on all these things and yet you have better profits. Well, part of it is you're saving a lot of money too. You're saving a lot of money on marketing, right? And the benefits of this come back. So Whole Foods, I can give you an example. A couple of years ago, in their Hartford store, which was a recent acquisition from Wild Oats, and they were still converting over the systems. On Christmas Eve, the cash registers stopped working around 4:30 p.m. at a time when the store was pretty crowded with shoppers heading home from work and buying last-minute supplies for their Christmas suppers. And the registers weren't working. 10, 15, 20 minutes went by, and the lines were growing longer, and people were getting antsy. And so the store manager took a decision on the spot and told her employees to start getting these people out of the store, start bagging their groceries, and let's clear up this backlog while we work on fixing the system. And when people came up to the front and said, okay, how do I pay you? Because they couldn't even open the cash registers. I mean, these cash registers are all electronically controlled now. So they had no way to take cash or any other form of payment. The cashier said, no, you don't have to pay us anything. You don't owe us anything. The groceries are free. They're on us. And people said, oh, thank you. Some people said, thank you. Some people said, oh, no, I'll come back. I'm going to go home and estimate what I owe you, and I'll pay you tomorrow or day after. And I said, no, you really don't have to do that. Or somebody said, some people said, we will make a donation to the food bank of an equivalent amount. I said, that would be very nice if you did that, but again, it's up to you. And about 20, 30 minutes later, the registers started functioning again, so things were back to normal. They had given away about $4,000 worth of groceries in that time. And that seemed to be the end of the story. The next day was Christmas, everything was closed. The day after that, one of those customers called the Hartford Courant, the local newspaper there, and said, you know what happened at Whole Foods the other night? I said, no, tell us. So he described what happened and so forth. So they wrote up a little story in a box in the local paper. And of course, it was on their website. And the next thing you know, this thing starts getting emailed around by people. It's a feel-good story, right? So it gets emailed around. It makes it into one of those top 10 most popular stories of the day. And that's how the CEO of the company sitting in Austin finds out about it. Okay, and I got an email from him forwarding the link saying we got some nice publicity out of Hartford. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is, if you look at a couple of things. First of all, what was the value of that publicity that was generated by doing the right thing? You could try to quantify it if you want. I'm sure that it was several hundred times more than the $4,000 that was spent. But more importantly, why did that store manager do this? She didn't do it with the calculation that, well, this is going to lead to hopefully some publicity, right? Or maybe she didn't put out a press release saying this is what we did, look how good we are. She simply did it because she felt it was the right thing to do. And that's a very important message of these businesses. They tend to operate in the idea of focus on doing the right actions and don't focus so much on the outcome. Outcome will generally take care of itself if the actions are right. Okay. And she didn't have to seek permission from any higher up. She was empowered, as everybody is in most of these companies. It's not a command and control top down. It's really decentralized, and you're allowing people to exercise their full creativity and their initiative. So the interesting thing, the lesson coming out of that, first of all, you benefit from all of that free marketing. But the second thing also is the purity of actions are very important. Viktor Frankl is a very famous psychiatrist who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is one of the most influential books of all time. I think the Library of Congress called it one of the 10 most important books ever written. And the message there was very simple. He had discovered what makes people happy. He said happiness cannot be pursued. Happiness, it says in our Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He said that's a false promise. The more you pursue happiness, the less happy you're likely to be. You might have some hedonic pleasure, what you might think is happiness, but the next morning you're back to square one. It's not real happiness. Happiness cannot be pursued. Happiness ensues from living a life of meaning and purpose, from doing work that is meaningful, from loving unconditionally others, and from finding meaning in suffering. When you do have suffering and everybody's guaranteed that, can you actually find some positive out of that? Can you grow from that? Can you create something that's a negative and turn it into a positive? And that lesson resonates very strongly in my mind with what the business world is all about. So the equivalent is profit. Right? Businesses think they're all about profit, just like human beings are about happiness. Well, profit cannot be pursued. The more you pursue profit, the less likely you are to be actually profitable in the long term. Profits are the outcome. Profits ensue as a result of doing the right things as a business, so having a higher purpose. Building a business based on love and not fear. This is what John Mackey, when he started Whole Foods, said, I want to build a business that's based on love. Most businesses are based on fear. Fear of losing your job, fear of not getting a promotion, fear of not getting a raise, all the rest of it, right? So I want to build a business based upon love and nurturing and caring within the system and beyond with our customers, employees, and the planet as a whole, for that matter. And the third element is finding meaning in suffering. So when something negative happens, good companies are able to actually rise from that and become even better. even though they went through that difficult time. Right? It's an interesting equation that captures that comes from Frankl's work, that despair equals suffering minus meaning. The more meaning you find, the less sense of despair results from suffering. And if you can create meaning that exceeds the amount of suffering, then you turn that despair around into hope and love and happiness. So the mother whose teenage daughter was killed by a drunk driver in a senseless accident had tremendous suffering, feeling of despair. Then after some time had passed, she got up and she said, this is not right. I don't want any other parent to ever suffer like this. Discovered that the person who had killed her daughter had already had 3 or 4 drunk driving convictions, had never been put away in jail, had never lost his license. He said, this has to change. So she formed Mothers Against Drunk Driving, an organization that has probably conservatively saved tens of thousands of lives in the last 15, 20 years, if not more. So think about the meaning that she found in that one suffering has far exceeded, in some sense, what her own suffering was, and that's really the lesson. And by the way, Frankl learned all of this. He had developed this theory, and then he was in the concentration camps, in Auschwitz and other places, and he really lived this and implemented this in his own life. His higher purpose was to teach people about how they can become happy. So again, these are very important lessons I think businesses need to learn about what is the purpose. Because when you become all about profits, if you stand up and say we're going to maximize profits and shareholder returns, well, every single stakeholder that is part of your universe now starts to think at that selfish individual level. So your customers think, well, I need to maximize my profit, which means get as much as possible. Try to cheat the company if I can. Employees think I should give as little and get as much as possible. Fewest hours, smallest amount of effort, etc. Suppliers want to squeeze you. Society wants to tax you. Everybody is out now for themselves. And hence you lose the very ability to make profits by focusing on profits. So it's a very important lesson we find. Profits is one of those goals. Objectives is a legitimate one, but it needs to be way down, and it needs to be the outcome of doing the right things. It is not, as Ed Freeman here says, we all need red blood cells to live, but the purpose of our life is not to produce more red blood cells. Right? And likewise, companies need profits in order to survive and grow and continue to exist, but that's not why they exist. There's another reason for being that has to go way beyond that.